so vivid and almost like a bomb of love, and it's extraordinary. So I just thought I would bring everyone along.
You know, not everyone has been to that place yet. I've not yet made it, so it's like those of us that haven't been can now go on pilgrimage down there, so that's good.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So, well, I'm going to introduce Lyna, and then it's her turn. For the next hour, we've got a talk and then questions and stuff. We've never met, Lyna and I, but we've exchanged communication. She's been a member of our Facebook group we have for the Mary Magdalene Studies Association. She's written several books and is French originally. So this is
yes.
Elle parle français, très bien. But we won't do it in French because not everyone does. And she's written several books. One is 12 Prayers, and another book is From Ashes to the Moon, a memoir of tears and miracles, about her life story and her spiritual journey. She'll tell us more about this, I'm sure. Now, she's, we were talking earlier before lunch about the links between French esotericism and American esotericism. So Lyna's a kind of living witness to that, in that she's brought up in France, lived here, but has ended up in the States, living in New York City and then Salt Lake City, otherwise known as the City of Tears. I think the idea is the angels wept so much it created a lake of salt. And, so, and I know she's had a varied career, but really is I regard her as the part of the hardcore Mary Magdalene trackers. If anyone can track down the truth about her, which is the point of the Mary Magdalene Studies Association, that's what we're doing here. Then Lyna is our advanced intelligent agent working on the Where is Mary? And she's going to be talking about where are the traces of Mary Magdalene now? And hopefully she'll, be talking us through that important topic. So thank you. Welcome, Lyna. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Thomas, for having me and for such a generous introduction. Is the sound okay? Perfect. Yes. Okay. All right. Hello. Okay. So where do I start? So as Thomas mentioned, I'm originally French. I grew up in Normandy, France, and I was born and raised in very challenging circumstances. And I want to quickly mention it because I believe that it is part of the Magdalene's path of, internal liberation. And I was born and raised as an orphan. I was raised by my great-grandparents until I was 12 and never knew my father, and my mother was an alcoholic for several decades and would be in and out of my life, and suffered, chronic abandonment and all the, consequent wounds, that went along with that. And then I was placed in foster families that were quite abusive in many ways. And then I moved to the United States of America when I was about 19 years old to start anew, and I saw a new opportunity, a new door opening for me, a new chance at life where I got to leave my wounded beginnings behind. However, ever since I was a young child, ever since I was 5 or 6 years old, I always had something deeper than a faith, a knowledge that, God existed. And although my understanding and how I relate to the extraordinary phenomenon of love that is God over the years, I just always knew, that God was a fact, was a truth. So I moved to the US when I was 19 years old and got married, had children. And when I was about 31 years old, let me think, no, I'm lying to you. I was 35. And I was working in New York City. I was working for a luxury company and living a really quite a fast-paced life in New York City. please let me know if the sound and like, the connection might not be, perfect, but just please do it like a sign with your hand if it's not, if the sound drops off out of nowhere. So I was living in New York City with my, on the outskirts of New York City with my two daughters. And I was, working downtown Manhattan for a luxury company, and I had a 3-hour commute every single day. And at the time I had a real book contract for my book of prayers and meditation. And it was just right around that time that I was introduced to Mary Magdalene, to a friend of mine, Carol, who had done a fabulous painting of Mary the Magdalene, and went to her home one day, and I was just staring at that painting, and she said, Mary Magdalene is here for you. And I thought, okay, whatever. I was always very Christ-oriented since I was a child, and I was totally dissociated from my feminine self. Oh, there's a black screen. Can you still hear me? Let me see.
Yeah, we can hear you, Lyna. It's just
perfect. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. Okay.
Keep going.
Perfect. Okay. So, I was totally dissociated due to the first half of my life, totally dissociated from my heart and my feminine divine, as I call it. But nevertheless, since that day when I met the Magdalene, I think we'll have those phenomenal encounters that change our life forever, and that was definitely one of them. There was a yearning, an internal drive, something that called me to study her, which I started to. And little did I know, a year later, I would be asked and guided to pack up my life in New York City, give everything away, take my two daughters and myself to move to Provence to study her. So, the time when I was working, I was working maybe, 10-hour days, and I had a 3-hour daily commute, and I was a single mother at the time. And I had publishing deadlines. I was no longer an amateur writer. I actually had, like an actual deadline and a book to write. And one night, after several months of really kind of being in a state of intense stress and losing my faith, and my ex-husband at the time had moved to Hong Kong, so now I was truly a single mom. My family was in France. And one night I thought, what, I surrender. And yes, I'm carrying a really heavy load right now, and I don't know how I'm going to accomplish it all. But all I know is that I'm done fighting it. I'm done. I give it to you. Take it. And the idea came through, what if I move to France? So again, it was 4 a.m, and I just looked at the cost of living, and how much it would cost, to rent and utilities, just to get, an average idea of what it would cost. And then I realized that if I moved to France, I actually would no longer have to work. And I could just, work on my book and study, the Magdalene and that intriguing, mysterious figure, that I was totally pulled towards. So 6 months later, I moved out of my apartment and literally gave everything away except my bedroom set that I sold for $200, and everything, every single piece of my furniture. And I found an international school. Oh, someone else is filming. For my two daughters, near Aix-en-Provence, and found a house in the country. And for about a year, I would come visit her sacred sites here in Saint-Baume and Saint-Maximin. At least once a week, I would drop off my daughters at school, and then I would make my way here. I would hike up the grotto or go to Saint-Maximin where her basilica is. And I would write, I truly wrote. So the book I wrote is a book of poetic prayers and meditation based on everyday themes such as motherhood, forgiveness, preparing yourself for a romantic partner or releasing a partner, how to find your divine purpose, how to connect with the goddess, with Mary Magdalene. So, those texts that I wrote are soaked, with my intentions and the presence that I encountered here, that literally transformed me from the inside out. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the history of these sites, according to local legends and many texts throughout the centuries, there were a couple of few saints that landed on the shores of southern France. That was called Gaul at the time. Again, there's no screen, but I'm assuming that you can still hear me and see me.
Yes, we can hear you finally.
Perfect.
And we can see you. On peut vous voir aussi.
Okay, perfect. So around 43 AD, Lazarus, from the Bible, and so the family of Bethany. So Mary of Bethany, Mary Magdalene, Mary of Magdala, Mary the Watchtower, Martha, Lazarus, Mary Salome, Saint Sarah landed, in Gaul. And what actually happened, which I did not know until recently, is that, at the time, there is also a legend saying that, the saints were put on a boat without oars and magically arrived in Marseille or, somewhere along the shores of Provence. But at the time, they did not have a GPS or, a compass or advanced material to guide them, through the Mediterranean Sea, through the ocean. So what actually happened, most likely, is that they actually traveled along the coast of several countries. So, they went along, like the coast of Italy, for example, and there actually are traces of Lazarus and Mary Magdalene in Cyprus. And in Sardinia as well, and would stop and they would travel around about between 8 and 10 kilometers away from the coast so that they would not get lost at sea. So when they arrived in 43 AD near Marseille in Sainte-Marie de la Mer, and actually I went there 3 years ago, and it's definitely a spot I would recommend. It has a very peculiar and powerful presence. Just hovering over the ocean. And it's beautiful. Camargue is a beautiful place to visit. So then Lazarus went on to become the first bishop of Marseille, actually. Marseille is a main port city in the south of France. And before the early Christians arrived, there was a temple dedicated to the goddess Diana near the old port there. And there are still some ancient remains of that temple, and the first oratory where, Lazarus and Mary Magdalene and the first saints came to share the good news. They came to share the miracles and the compassion that they witnessed as they walked along Jesus. So Mary Magdalene and Lazarus, stayed in Marseille for a while, sharing their message and teaching. And I was going to say preaching as well, but I feel that preaching sometimes has a not so positive connotation. So I prefer, teaching and sharing. So then what happened is that Mary Magdalene, Lazarus stayed in Marseille. There's actually still his seat in a crypt in the Saint Victor Basilica in Marseille, and underneath you can still see the seat where, like a seat made out of stone where he allegedly, taught from and sat, and there's still his relics there. And he was and still is so beloved by the community. So then Mary Magdalene with Saint Maximus, who was one of the 70s, to whom the care of Mary Magdalene had been entrusted. So Saint Maximus also arrived on the same boat as the saints. So they went up north, slightly east to Aix-en-Provence. And we actually find traces of Saint Maximin and Mary Magdalene teaching in one of the main plazas of what was a Roman city at the time. And there's a cathedral there called La Cathédrale Saint-Sauveur, which means the cathedral of the Holy Savior. And there's like a little corner where there's actually an old baptismal font that is back to the 6th century in that cathedral. And also some remains of an old Roman plaza as well, which more like, highly likely, according to some local texts as well, that we have found that Saint Maximus and the Magdalene taught there. So then they went up the Via Aurelia, which is, for those who are walking this journey along with me on my social media, the Via Aurelia was an ancient Roman highway, if you will, that people used and that connected various cities in the south of France. And it was built, I believe, around 6 BC, actually 6th century BC. And along some portions of the Via Aurelia, you can still see some old Roman stones that is left, and it's quite magical to see. So they went along, they went eastward to go to Villa Lata, which is San Maximin today. And Villa Lata is actually where we found the sarcophagus of Saint Mary Magdalene in 1279, December 9th. Oh, I'm getting goosebumps. December 9th, 1279. And what had happened is that, there was an argument between Vézelay, which is in Burgundy, and Provence, about the whereabouts and the location of the relics and the bones and the body of Mary Magdalene. And when they could not find the entirety of her body and her sarcophagus and her relics in Burgundy after some research there around 1267, Charles II really felt strongly that he was convinced that the relics of Mary Magdalene, that her body laid in Provence near Saint Maximin. And according to some old parchments that date back to even before the Middle Ages, Charles II actually had a dream. He had and again, this is just from text, okay, that we have found. He had a dream where Mary Magdalene visited him as he was, in the area to look for her relics. And he said that she showed him where her body was, and that it was in a field near Villa Lata, near the ancient church of Villa Lata. So, they started doing, some excavating in the area, and they found an old oratory in Saint Maximin, right? And now, actually, if you search the internet, you can see in 1992, they did some excavation, and they found an old oratory, a preaching font, if you will, dating back from the 5th century. So then once Charles II found it, he knew that her relics, that her body had to be there. And sure enough, a few meters away from the old preaching font, we're going to call it, they found a sarcophagus with a body, bones, and a note saying that the body of the beloved Mary Magdalene, had been put to rest in that sarcophagus, and that it had been transferred in the 8th century from a sarcophagus that was made of alabaster, the woman with the alabaster jar that was often used, in 1st century Palestine, Israel, and in Egypt as well. And with her tongue was still attached actually to her throat, and there was a couple of branches of fenouil, and now I can't even think of the word in English. You see my poor brain. With several wax tablets, with text in it. And when they opened it, there was the most wonderful, delicate fragrance that rose from her body. There was also a piece of skin that was still attached to her forehead, that had the imprint of 2 fingers, as if 2 fingers had been pressed against her forehead. And that piece of skin was still attached to her skull, to the bone, to her skull. And to this day, that relic is here in Saint-Baume, and it's in Saint Maximin, excuse me. And it's called the Noli Me Tangere relic, which means do not touch me. Because according to tradition, when Mary the Magdalene, who's also the apostle to the apostle, when she found the empty tomb on the morning of the resurrection, and when she saw Jesus appear in his light body, in his resurrected body, whatever label you wish to describe this marvelous experience, apparently, she rushed to embrace him and to find him again, but he stopped her with his 2 fingers saying, do not touch me yet. let go of me because I have not yet ascended. So that's the story around that relic. And you can see her the relic of her skull as well here in Saint Maximin. You can still hear me whenever I see like a black screen. It worries me a little bit. Yes,
no,
still good? Perfect.
We can hear you fine. Keep going, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And on Thursday night, actually, you know, I was honored and humbled and privileged to participate in a ceremony that takes her relics out of the crypt in Saint Maximin. It's done once a year, you know, to open her festivities here. And it's led and it's conducted by the association Sancto Maddaleno, who is in charge of the relics, if you will. And my dear friend Veronique is part of the association, and she called me that morning. And she asked me if I wanted to participate and see her relics being brought out and, you know, into the open basilica. And I was, you know, fortunate enough to get really close and to see the Magdalene, you know, being carried out into the open so that everyone could see her and commune with her, you know, on the deeper level. And, you know, just coming here, you know, has not been easy yet. You know, I stopped believing I would actually even make it to Provence, to France. And it's been a wonderful opportunity, and I'm so lucky, you know, to made it here. So do you have any questions about what I've touched on so far? Any comments?
Well, can I ask a question?
Yes, you can try.
I mean, this, yeah, the skull that you have there, the relic.
Right, right.
I mean, is the on this little flap of skin, there are two finger marks. So is the implication that they stayed on her forehead all the time after Jesus touched her? Is that
yes,
what the locals believe?
That is what is believed. And, you know, in 1974, the CNRS, which is almost like the National Association of Science in France, did a thorough study of her relics and her skull and examined her relics, you know, for 3 months, and did very detailed examinations on her ethnicity. And basically what they came up with was that that skull belonged to a woman who was fairly petite. She was maybe in feet, maybe 5'1", maybe 5 foot, and that she was, you know, of Semitic origin, you know, near Israel and Palestine, and that she also, they had found in her hair, because we also have the relics of her hair that was preserved and that they found in the sarcophagus. And actually her hair had grown so much that it literally actually went all the way down to her feet when they opened the sarcophagus. Oh, the wind feels so nice. And what they found, Thomas, what those scientists found was some remnants of clay that is only characteristic of a clay that's found in the Middle East. You know, so that is, you know, the scientific part of it, because I believe that it is very important. There are two worlds as we walk this path along with the Magdalene. There is the path of historicity, of history, and of facts, of empiricism, of empiric facts that we can more or less base ourselves upon, that we can rely on, and that's very important in order to have a grounded foundation upon which we build a relationship with her. And then there is the mystical aspect, the personal relationship, and that will look very different from person to person, and that is something you have to cultivate on your own. You know, so I believe that you can meet truth at the point where both history, which does not know everything, of course, and it can become quite subjective of the centuries and interpretation and projections of people. You can find the truth about her where history and personal revelation meet. And you know that when you receive something that is somewhat supported by grounded facts, then you know you're onto something. And I think it's incredibly important in order to almost protect her from personal projections. Now, it is also a process, it is a journey, you know, an inward journey that we move into, several climates of consciousness that we must work through in order to see really clearly and to clear our heart to see from that spot. And you know, Thomas, the reason why this year, that year in Provence was so transformative for me is that it was a journey of profound healing inwardly, of internal liberation and purification, where I excavated and lifted all my wounds and the veils of past trauma, of experiences that were covering my heart from seeing truly, from seeing others truly, from seeing life truly, and from being connected to that infinite presence of love within my heart that now no one can take away from me. Now, yes, sometimes I can allow myself to lean out of that state of love, but it is always my choice because it never departs from me. And, you know, I remember many days, you know, when I was just transforming past stories and past heartbreaks and blocks, phenomenal blocks I had due to my childhood and my past and just life happening. You know, we all carry our weight, you know, and I remember I would just go up that grotto, and it was the first time I felt a mantle or a womb of pure unconditional love outside of myself. It was something I'd never truly experienced because my mother, who also had been traumatized as a child, who also had been abandoned, you know, an intergenerational pattern that exists in my family. That as we heal those patterns, then we can touch on truth within ourselves much more clearly. But I would go up there and spend the entire day just feeling that love and feeling comforted and giving it up to that presence. It's incredible, even in the forest, and it's incredibly healing, and just having that presence outside of me, comforting me before I was able to find it within myself. You know, that was the bridge for me. I first had to go up there, first had to go up, if you will, you know, go up the several climates and go on that hike and to experience it in that cave, in that grotto. And then when I left, I had to find it within myself, and now I can. And now whenever, you know, I come here, I mean, this is my favorite place in the world. I feel home and I miss it. You know, when I come home, I usually go up there and honestly, I cry like a baby. But now I know that that bridge also exists between my mind and my heart. And I think that this is the bridge and the path and the journey we have to take on as a civilization, as humanities, the reopening and reconnecting to our heart. So let's see. Okay, we're doing good on time. So that has been my journey here, and the presence that is, you know, phenomenal, that ultimately gets us back to, you know, our heart, our internal heart, which is the seat of our spiritual sovereignty and power and true perception, as she guides us, you know, in her gospel, in the Gospel of Mary. She guides us, you know, through the soul is guided through a path of several climates to re-enter, you know, our internal kingdom, which is the heart. So
I want to ask a practical question, just very simple.
Yes.
You know, so if you could show us again on the camera where the cave is, just point to it again.
Yes. You know what? I'm actually going to turn it around. I'm going to walk you guys there, okay?
Okay. Just point us in the direction.
Yeah. Okay. So let me turn it around. Perfect. Okay, so if you can see my fingers, see right there. And I can even walk, Thomas, if you would like to. I just don't have the connection.
No.
But see, right
No,
up
no,
there, I don't know if
fine.
you can see like a tiny little square on the top of the mountain. And that is actually called the Saint-Pilon, or there's a chapel. So according to tradition, every single day, Mary Magdalene was uplifted by angels. And it's at the very top of the mountain. And then right beneath there is her grotto, which is closed now. And actually, if you go, you can actually go along the path here. You can go on this side and then go up. There's also the egg cave, like I was there, which is actually on this side, which was a cave that's dedicated to fertility and the feminine divine. And then this is the hotellery where you can stay. And but yeah, it's right there. The cave is closed now. Unfortunately, it was closed on June 12th because there were some risks of injury from rocks falling down. There's like a net, like right on the left of the grotto as you go up, there's like a net that's filled with rocks to hold them back. But now, the net is full of rocks and there's, risk of injury. So it's been closed by the village. So we can't quite, we can't go up to the grotto, but we can go up to the forest and, and still enjoy that presence here, and just so peaceful and something really special. So,
and what did you say about a cave of eggs? What's the egg?
Okay, so here, let me come back here. So you guys get to see Provence here. So, the cave of eggs, it's a tiny little cave that's located on the right hand side of the main grotto, and it's quite hard to find, but also believe if you're meant to find it, you will find it. And it literally is in the shape of a yoni, a female yoni, if you will. And even inside, if you go down, it has it's quite dark inside. You can go quite deep. But before the first Christians arrived in the area, it was a cave that was dedicated to rites of fertility, of the feminine divine. And still to this day, there are, many women and men, who want to have a deeper experience of the feminine principle, the feminine essence, the fertility, on many levels. Being fertile, means being creatively fertile, or, being fertile with those energies of the heart as well. But yeah, it can be quite tricky to find. It's a very powerful hidden gem here in Saint-Baume.
I'm asking because I've just written the Book of the Egg, which is the first
interesting.
ever book. Synchronistically, I published it last week. It's the first ever book on the nature of the egg. And I looked at it cosmologically, symbolically, and all that. And if I'd known about the egg cave, I would have put it in. So in the next edition, I'm going to add the egg cave.
And there's also, Thomas, if I may add, a legend, a story that says that, the red egg is also very associated with Mary Magdalene. So there's, a legend saying that she went to Rome, she traveled to Rome to see the Emperor Tiberius, I believe, and to share, the story of the resurrection, with him. And he said, then I guess there was an egg, and he said that this egg is more likely to turn red than a man is likely to come back alive from the dead. So then Mary Magdalene held the egg and it turned red. And what's really interesting too, I found a text recently that goes back to the 2nd century. That's from the epistle of Tiberius to Pilate. And basically, Tiberius says that, and that's, and I could even send you the references if whoever is interested, addressing a letter to Pilate, asking him why he had crucified an innocent man, and saying that Mary Magdalene had come to see him to testify of, the resurrection, all, the miracles and all the healings he did. And that, she was quite upset at the crucifixion and what had gone on. So that was the text I just again recently came across, but that dates back to the 2nd century. So yes, interesting, isn't it?
Do send us the link. Yeah, these letters. one of my ambitions, I don't know if I'll pull it off, but you can all help, is I want to publish a new version of the Bible with all the missing books, all the Apocrypha, the Gnostic Gospels, Gospels of Mary, Thomas, and also all the extra bits of the Old Testament. So the books of Enoch, the Testaments of the Patriarchs, Moses' Apocryphal journeys. There's so much more, and it would make the Bible about 10 times as big as it is now. But it would give us the real picture. At the moment, we're not reading the proper Bible. We're just reading a bit of it, and it would make Jewish, Christian, and later Islamic ideas much more, understandable.
Well, and to add on top of that, which I wanted to actually mention, is another apocryphal text that was actually found in, oh my gosh, I can't pronounce it in English. But anyway, somewhere in a monastery in Greece, back in the 80s by a French scholar. And it's not the Gospel of Philip, but it's the Acts of Philip. He found it among ancient parchments, and it was dated back to the 4th century. And, it says, it speaks about a woman called Mariamne. And, in many sources, we find Mariamne as the Greek name for Mariam, Magdalene, Mary Magdalene. And Mary Magdalene, so Mariamne, in that gospel, was actually sent off with Philip the apostle as, her brother. And she was one of the leading messengers, if you will, where Christ actually gave her a list of specific nations to take his message to. And according to Philip, Mariamne was baptizing women, while he was baptizing men. Yes. So it's also very, interesting text that contains so much, just many clues about, Mary Magdalene and her whereabouts. It says that she also, did healings, and actually once. Now, a lot of those stories are to be taken as archetypal stories as well. But Philip stopped one day to do a healing, and he basically dipped his fingers into the mouth of Mariamne because her saliva was pure enough to conduct her healing. So that's another really powerful text because it underlines and her role as the apostle to the apostles and as a magnificent teacher and one of the most important, if not the most important teacher of the radical teacher called Jesus. And it really elevates her and restores her role and her mission and what was so dear to her heart, and that she carried on with her until the end of her life. She was his messenger, and she carried on that compassion. And, she, as a first witness, she had that knowledge bursting through her, that the people she met could feel that. It was not like we just preached now from a text or from our personal experiences, but she'd been a witness. And that carried a potency that we can't really access now unless we do some serious work and commune with that love within ourselves all the time and return to it. So I think now we can take questions. Any comments?
Anyone that's got a question, just unmute yourself or a comment on what we've heard Lyna say.
And I have a lot of friends who are in the US, so I know they're asleep, so they're going to be watching it afterwards.
Right.
Hi, I'm Mary Marina from America, from Seattle.
Hi.
Thank you. That was so beautiful. And I'm writing a book, and I've been living in Morocco, and now I'm living in Turkey, and doing the same thing you're doing. And you've confirmed all the details that I also went there to St. Maximum, and I haven't gone to St. Marie de la Mer yet, but I really appreciate all of totally confirm, and you're confirming all the details. What was the name of the, you were saying it's a Roman, the old Roman road?
Via Aurelia. So it's called, so Via, V-I-A. And then Aurelia, A-U-R-E-L-I-A.
Okay, great,
And
thank you.
yeah, if you look it up, you know, I was able to also to find it on a map. There are many, you know, like all the maps. I still have to find the portion that lives Aix-en-Provence. But you know, it was a meditation in and of itself. They just said that. It was, you know, just, and it's interesting just from a historical point of view to kind of ground it back together. But yes, definitely something intriguing to see.
So hopefully, I hope I come and join Thomas, and maybe you, will you come in October, hopefully, to Levant, where we're going to be.
Oh, yes, I'll probably be online. I will be back in the US, unless I get stuck here, but you know, I mean, there are worse places, you know, to get stuck in, but yeah, I'll be back in the US in October, so my home.
Yeah. Well, nice to meet you.
So,
and
nice to meet you, and yes, good luck. It sounds like you're on a wonderful adventure, and you know, you'll be given exactly what you need, you know, just step by step. So that's exciting. Yes, I'm happy for you.
So true. Thank you. And you too.
You're welcome.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yes, please.
Jump in. So when I was reading the book of Megan Watterson, the recent book she did, I loved that book. It was great. And then you popped up in the narrative. You helped her on her journey. Can you tell us about meeting her and what she's like, and what did you do with her? How did you interact?
Yes. Okay. You know, so, you know, we had a brief dinner, you know, at the time I was living here, and, you know, so we had dinner in Aix, and then you know, I met her again, you know, at Saint-Maximin. And, you know, I shared, you know, my journey with her, and some information on the sites and the egg cave, for example, and just our personal experiences, you know, that we exchanged with, you know, Mary Magdalene. But yeah, you know, Rose, so that was at the time my pen name, you know, it's also a family name, and I was trying to change, but you know, the French administration did not approve it. So anyway, but yeah, so if you've read the book, I'm Rose, you know, the narrative, and yeah, you know, it was a lovely encounter, and I'm grateful, you know, for the sisterly time, you know, that we shared, and that love and devotion and passion for Mary Magdalene, and also a different type of Christianity. Which I felt, you know, when I walked along the Via Aurelia. There was no one in Mars, and that's why at some point I came back, because I'm like, if anything happens, like, no one's going to find me, like, until like 2051. But you know, I would have felt almost transported, you know, into a more simple timeline, where I really sensed and felt what it was like to be alive in 43 AD, for example, you know, way before there had been so many layers imposed on Jesus and his message, and, you know, which is not, you know, the natural course, you know, although I don't think he foresaw that. But all is right. But, you know, it was just really pure and radical way of life. So hope that answers your question.
We've got a question in the chat from Jen. She's asking two questions. Firstly, how did July the 22nd become her feast day? Have you researched that?
Well, there is a legend. Oh, okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, go for that one first, and then I'll read the second one.
You know, honestly, I don't quite remember. Like, when I remember doing some research, but I don't remember the technicalities of it. There was a legend, actually, I was reading about maybe 10 kilometers from here. There was a legend that on July 22nd, there were some people who were blaspheming against her here in the area, and it was on July 22nd. Let me see if I can find it, because I was just reading about it in a book. Let me see if I can actually find it. And that apparently, you know, she, it doesn't sound nice, but that, again, that's just a legend. She sent them into a dark hole because they were blaspheming, which doesn't actually sound like her, but that was a legend I never heard about. Let me see if I can find it. I have the book, and I was literally reading about it earlier. That is Saint Maximin, la Basilique. But I know that, you know, it has been her feast day since, let me see, officially since 1969. Yeah, I can't. But anyway, Jen, you know, if you want to send me, if you're interested in that little story. But again, you know, like legends evolve through the, you know, the cultural perceptions of people, you know, at the time, through the consciousness, you know, through that lens. But it happened on July 22nd, and then I guess, you know, from that day on, it kind of became her birthday and her feast day, you know, if you will. And then it became official, became her feast officially in 1969 as per the Catholic Church. So
I think it's a very good question. Let me just add that it's something to put on the agenda for next year. Somebody should do the research and give a talk. All I would add is that for many centuries, she wasn't recognized as a saint by the official churches. Her sainthood has been problematic. Obviously, she's a saint, she's an apostle, but not officially in the Catholic Church. So it would be tied in with that, why July 22nd was attached. It's only since, I think it was Pope Benedict and now Pope Francis, finally have made it official that she's a saint. Before that, she's been an underground or unofficial saint, so she didn't really have a day. But there's some mysteries to find out. That's great. The other question Jen asked is, what kind of wisdom or guidance do you think she would give us today during this intense time on the planet?
Woohoo! No pressure. No, that's a great question. Thank you. And again, I can only speak from my personal experience. You know, I think that our personal truth is not always universal, and I think that sometimes it can be something that can be of great help to others, and sometimes I think it's literally just, you know, for ourselves, especially when it comes to personal revelation. So I thread really carefully. But what I do know for sure is that she was all about emotional healing, personal, internal liberation, you know, from any lower climates, lower spiritual energies, blocks that can prevent us from expanding our light out into the world, from seeing with love, and from being truly allowing the light of our heart shine through. You know, so I think that during this time, it's a call to go inward and cultivate our relationship with ourselves, with our shadows, so that we may, you know, transform it and turn it into light, so that we may really remove all the blocks that we may have against, you know, our faith, that, you know, this can be turned into an opportunity for greater healing and growth. And now also, what I received is that back then, you know, still people were not as allergic to stillness as we are now. They were not constantly stimulated by external information and having that chronic, almost sickly need to be stimulated and to be distracted and to be occupied. They would pray and meditate for hours and just sit in stillness. And I think that she would make the best of that gift, right? So we can look at how we're being forced to be still and go inward, or we can see it as an opportunity that we haven't had in a long time to really do more inner work and be present with it and reconnect to our internal depth, so that when we are called to go out into the world again, it is with larger wings of love, a more expansive version of ourselves with less blocks. You know, and that's also why I'm studying psychology, because when we liberate matter, any psycho-emotional trauma that has literally become lodged inside of us, then spirit and love can enter. And amazing things happen, and that I can testify of personally. You know, and then it gets, you know, I mean, you know, studies do show that even, you know, intergenerational trauma or early childhood trauma, you know, it turns into diseases, into sickness, even just stress, you know. So really it's about purification, you know, of the self, so that we may be easier to really reconnect with the presence of love. It's more direct. We don't have to almost like fight our way through the presence of love in our heart because we feel so disconnected from it. But, you know, it's unblocked.
Thank you very much, Lyna. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hi.
We had a question from Trisha as well. Trisha asked, are there more legends or stories about how the caves were used? Like, did she live there for 30 years, you said?
About 30 years, according to local legend. And yes, you know, the forest was also dedicated to the goddess Artemis, you know, pre-Christian times. And, you know, the Divine Feminine. We also know that, for example, on the main plaza of Saint-Maximin, there was also another, almost like a temple, not quite a temple, that was dedicated to, you know, to the goddess and those rituals. And, you know, so that's also very present, you know, in the area. So definitely, especially the Sandbone Forest. We know that it was a site that was dedicated to Artemis and the Divine Feminine, the goddess. Hello, Aunt. No, you're not welcome. I love you, but no. But I mean, there are many stories that will literally, that would take another lecture or workshop. So
can you just point the camera and show us the forest?
Yes, of course, I would love that. Listen, I'm so grateful that the connection has been perfect, because I mean, like, as you can see, this is literally in the middle of nowhere. So let me turn it around. So, you know, I'm like, I hope, please just make the connection work. So there it is here. I'm going to just get up here. Let's see. Yeah, there it is.
So to walk to the cave, you have to cross through that forest, yeah?
Yes, and you know, basically, so like, if you go, you can go this way, all the way, but there's also another path on the other side of the hotel, in the other side right there, that's called the Path of the Kings. And, you know, that's the traditional way. It's a little bit easier and faster. This beautiful vegetation here. But basically, it's called the Path of the Kings because, you know, it is the third pilgrimage site for Christianity, you know, in the world. So a lot of French kings, you know, and kings from other nations as well in Europe, who would come and, you know, on pilgrimages here, you know, so, right? Okay, so, yes, but there are several ways, you know, like sometimes I'll kind of like, you know, to get lost and spend quite a bit of, you know, of time, I'll go path in the forest, you know, where it's quiet, but it's about a 45-minute hike, you know, if you go straight up, so.
It looks wonderful. And what are the trees?
Yes.
Silly question. What's the tree you've been under? What are the trees?
I have no idea. Honestly, I have no idea. But, you know, it does have chain holding it up. But I do not know what it is.
It looks very ancient. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. It's beautiful. I love the vegetation here.
Right. Okay.
Very
Any
beautiful.
final questions for Lyna before we're moving on to our next speaker now, who is also, she's from south of France, the Pyrenees. So Lyna, we want to say thank you very much for your contribution. We feel we're all there with you. So thank you for bringing that energy.
Hello.
And
beautiful. Thank you for having me. Au revoir.
Okay. Merci bien, madame. Right. Let's move on to our next speaker, which is Susie. Susie, you've got to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I'll just very briefly introduce Susie. We met through the Mary Magdalene Association. She lives down in the Pyrenees at a magical Mount Bugarach, which is, she'll tell us more about that mountain. It's one of the Cathar sacred mountains, like Montségur. And she's been living there for many years and knows a lot about the legends and the energy of the area. But she's essentially a spiritual pilgrim from many years traveling throughout the world in India, and but originally actually born in France, but grew up partly in Britain. So anyway, it's a pleasure to have your presence, Susie, and go for it. Thank you. Welcome.
Yeah. So yeah, I've also much traveled in India, and actually I wanted to bring some of my understandings of Indian spirituality this time, because I know I talked about Bugarach Mountain last time, but I wanted to bring in my understanding of the Indian way to bring some more light on Mary Magdalene. So that I want to talk about Mary Magdalene as being a doorway to the divine feminine and to the goddess, essentially. So when we're presented with Mary Magdalene, although there are many, many stories, she's still essentially an unknown. She's taken on mythical sanctity in the same way as Jesus. But the early Gnostics, they didn't focus on whether such characters actually existed or not. They may have existed and they may not have, but the importance in a spiritual regard, rather than the later literalist religious regard, was about them being archetypes that one can relate to on a personal level as a tool for spiritual growth and spiritual exploration and spiritual experience. So if it is so that Jesus and the Marys and the disciples, they all existed, which is naturally a possibility, they were humans with qualities and weaknesses, as are all people, but their manner of living touched the heart of an already existing tradition of the sacrificed king who is reborn, and the Isis mother and child iconography, and the sanctity of the divine lovers, which somebody else had mentioned. And if they didn't exist, that is, if they were story-like creations by spiritual seers to engage the people in spiritual life, then this is also fine, because what's important is that there's been gifted here to the world consciousness principles of love and forgiveness, and love thy neighbor and do unto others as one would wish for oneself. This is the combining of ethics and purity of being with the old understanding that this world is not just a place of the mundane, but it is in every way sacred. And this old concept is a tantric concept. And the new way adds the idea of evolutionary personal growth and the relevance of compassion, which is in essence the gift of Christianity, which has been at other times in other lands been expressed in Jainism, especially, and Buddhism, and later in Bhakti Yoga, which is the yoga of love. So it's a theme which the heart and the soul delights in. So where does the original path of compassion and love for all begin? But way back in the times when the goddess was fully revered. So we had the warring religion that came along of the male interests, and this sublimated what once was. The male god was adopted to suit a time of conquests and the dominion of kings. And gradually the goddess was phased out of the people's consciousness. She was allowed to remain as a consort to the god, and then she just disappeared. She became temple courtesan and then simply prostitute. She was the sun and then the moon and then the earth, and only the earth, which was ravaged and raped and demeaned as no longer spiritual. Only the heavens were now spiritual. She was the priestess, the Vestal Virgin, the guardian of the hearth and the home. And then men usurped the role of priests, and she was married off, and her home became a place to imprison, control, and enslave her, rape her, beat her, murder her and her daughters, from matriarchy to patriarchy, from love to lust, from compassion to war. And what of the spiritual soul of humanity? What happens there? What to do? It needed the reawakening of love. And hence there came forth Jainism, Buddhism, and Christianity, repackaging and gifting what had long ago been lost to us, albeit presented by men. The love of the goddess returns, minus the goddess. And this is where an often marginalized figure like Mary Magdalene becomes someone to naturally resonate with, because on a soul level, regardless of our lost history, our lost memories, our unconscious overlaying conditioned mindset, she is none other than the lost goddess herself. And that is why we love her. She is disguised as a peripheral figure. She has been demoted by the church, at one time said to be a prostitute. Her kiss with Jesus was erased from scripture. The male followers were jealous of her and annihilated her relevance, and they fashioned what would become Christianity. But she survived onwards as a saint. Like Mother Mary, there was a place for her, though not at the center of religion. And eventually Protestantism banished her altogether. As I said, spirituality had become only of the heavens, the afterlife, from the richness of existence to non-existence, from variety of divinity to the void. It's the only way that love has been permitted in new religion, by distancing it from reality, from real life. And in a country like France, which is not particularly religious anymore, and not since the revolution, and in this part of France, since the Cathars were massacred, it affected the people. But despite this loss of religious passion, there has always remained a fascination for the Black Madonnas, for Mother Mary and for Mary Magdalene herself. And it is so because one has to rebalance the imbalance, to re-find magic in seeming mundane mechanical existence. Intuitively, one reaches towards any remaining fragmentary representations of the lost goddess. In times of suffering, when healing is needed, prayer is made naturally to these female divinities, just as once long ago in ancient times. The mind forgets, but the soul does not. So I talked about fragmentary aspects of the goddess. Fragmentary impressions of the dismantled goddess. This is a theme in India. It's also in Egypt with the god. But in India, it's the theme of the goddess, where she was demeaned and lost to humanity And parts of her body were to be found in various places, where temples of Shakti, goddess energy, became pilgrimage places. Maybe there had fallen her hand, or maybe her eye, but all these remaining fragmented images of the supreme goddess are also with us in the female saints, with Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene. And when we focus on these beings as fully sacred, we reconnect with original source, which is unhindered soul presence. It's love, it's compassion, bliss, wisdom, and energy. In India, which was where I've lived, the divine feminine lasted and was preserved better than anywhere else on the planet. Still the goddesses are there and they're revered, and still the trees and rivers and the springs and the rocks, which was once the way of our ancestors too. And this is why I find India so interesting and inspiring, because we had everything that we once knew covered over by these very powerful religions of Islam and Christianity and Judaism. And in India, they never had everything covered over. So we can see their clues as to what was once ours. But in this part of France where I live, in Occitanie, in the far south, Mary Magdalene is very important. She has the status of being wealthy and beautiful, and she came to live in this region, so it is said, after the crucifixion of her beloved Jesus. Either she came alone or she came with Jesus, who escaped his presumed death on the cross. There are both kinds of stories. And the question arises once more, did her feet really walk upon this land? Maybe. Or was she a Christian accepted manifestation of already existing primal goddesses? And again, this becomes unimportant, and she may indeed have been here, but the true relevance is that by this mythology or story, one connects to the goddess who had been lost to us. Mary Magdalene links us to the goddess. She links us to soul. She offers an alternative to the official story of the three male god aspects of the Son and the Father and the Holy Ghost who had usurped her throne. Mary Magdalene, she offers a way to blend the manifestation of the male God with the original divine feminine in her manifestation as the lover of Jesus, which opens one up to the spiritual experience of the divine couple. Equality of beings bound in love, no one's slave and no one's master, all are born of the divine. And it is by the dance of love that divinity is most potently realized. In India, this is known and it's symbolized by the dance of the Rasa Leela. And it's the highest ideal of Bhakti Yoga, which is the yoga of love. This is a love that forgets all rules and all social constructs. Whatever is official religion is forgotten. This is yet another construct. All is shelved for love. Love has many forms. It is that which is between a mother and a child, for friendship. It is healing of the wounded. It's compassion for all creatures. And it is the vital bridge between man and woman. Forget hierarchy, forget war and power games, forget the expected. just surrender to love and love only. This is the greatest gift of the goddess to the masculine. All you have run after will never satisfy. You are alone on your pinnacle. You live by the sword and then you die by the sword. And what is that all about? Come back to the soul and dance. That dance means magic. The mundane becomes divinized. The fight becomes a farce. The heart and the soul reawaken. The goddess is refound. This is just about love, and I've written my own version of the Lord's Prayer in a divine feminine form. So I want to finish by reading this. O Mother of the Cosmos, creating all in light, focus upon us this light so that we may know the way. Create your vision by our hands and with our hearts. Your desire is ours in all light and form. Grant our daily needs for both bread and spiritual insight. Free us from our mistakes as we let go of holding on to others' guilt. Waken us from forgetfulness. Free us from immature ways. From you we receive glory, potency, and life. Your song is beautiful and always renewing. May all of this be realized and true. Thank you.
Greetings. Well, thank you, Susie.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm sure there are people who would like to comment or ask questions about this.
Yeah.
So who wants to go first? Welcome, Briellen from Australia, who's joined us just now, and who's been studying the Mary Magdalene Gospel for many years, I believe. And so anyone who would like to pose a question to Susie? Deborah, you're with us, are you? I think it's your turn. Go on, ask a question.
Sorry.
Debbie.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Hi. That was absolutely breathtaking. It was beautiful. Thank you so much. Question. What sort of question? What made you come up with the idea for the feminine Lord's Prayer? What was the idea behind that?
You know, it was when we were actually hanging out together.
Oh, wow.
We went to Mary Magdalene's cave.
Oh, right.
And
last year.
And I was singing in Aramaic, the Lord's Prayer. And I thought, well, this is such a male presentation. I want to find what may have been the origin behind it all. And then I looked at the Aramaic words, and then I found this presentation which I could relate to.
Wow.
But it was our adventure.
Oh, wow. I think I videoed you, recorded you singing as well. I think that was with Arthur, wasn't it?
I think Anouk filmed me singing the Lord's Prayer. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. Nice to see you.
And you. No, that was absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good. Any other questions anyone's got for Susie? Tell us, I mean, I know that you spoke more about it last time, but tell us a bit, for those that weren't here last time and didn't hear your talk last year, tell us a bit more about Mount Bugarach and why it's important, what it symbolizes.
So last year I did talk about the mountain and this holy environment that I live in. It's the village of Bugarash. It's where the end of the world safe location was in Europe in 2012, where there's a magical mountain and the aliens are supposed to be connected with it. And the aliens were supposed to be coming to rescue everyone and take them to another dimension. So this very quiet village became suddenly known all over the world because all the world media came here and filmed it. So, but it's always been a very special place. It's Bugarash is like the mountain of the Lord, is the holy mountain, and it has legend. And in the legend, it talks of the goddess Nor, who's completely forgotten as a goddess. She's not recorded in any way except in this legend. And Nor, we know that as a word relates to light from the Middle East. But it was also a local Occitan word, but the meaning of it is lost, but it is relating to the goddess. And this was definitely an ancient pilgrimage place, but forgotten to be so. Because on the mountain, there are figures to be seen, giant figures of like a great meditating kind of Buddha on one edge of the mountain. People call it the Buddha because it looks like it's in meditation. And then in the middle of the mountain, there's a goddess with outstretched wings. And obviously this was recognized by the ancient people. There's no way it wouldn't have been. And there was a legend that has come forward to this time, which gives clues about how people related to the mountain. So there was a story about how this land was becoming devastated by the storms, by the storm god. I don't have all the names and everything here. Ceres was his name. And he was just going crazy, destroying the crops, destroying people's houses. And the people were praying. They were praying in the forests, in the groves, to the fairies, the spirit people. There would be rocks with interesting formation, and they would pray to those as like gods and goddesses. And then there were two giants, as well as the goddess Nor. And the giants were called Bug and Arash, who the village is now named after. And they prayed to the god Jupiter to do something to take away the terrible behavior of this storm god. And to get closer to Jupiter, Bug and Arash climbed one on the other's shoulder, and by their climbing up to get closer to the heavens, they formed the body of the Bugarash mountain. And then the goddess was able to be there on her throne, and the village was protected forevermore. So this is a very sacred place. There are lots of caves, hidden caves in the hillsides, in the trees. There's like caves of Mary Magdalene, supposedly. Rennes Chateau is just very close by, which is supposed to be where there's supposed to be an ancient temple to the goddess Isis. And we have the hot springs of Rennes which were very sacred to the ancient people. And we have the Black Madonna in the town of Lyna, which is the closest town.
So we're coming up to tea time, but if anyone's got any last questions, we'll have a little break for tea. But has anyone got any final questions for Susie before she goes and puts the kettle on? I was interested when I came down to that part of the world. I've been down there 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
I discovered this vicar who lived in Allée-les-Bains, I think. He was researching the Druid culture because there's a few standing stones and menhirs there. And I think that was quite a Celtic sort of part of the world, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was very pre-Celtic even. It was from very ancient, earliest times. Up above Allet-les-Bains, there's a hamlet called Saint-Sauveur. It's like right up in the clouds. And there are caves there that I found where there are ancient remains of a type of prehistoric people. And there's a standing stone, and it's a very interesting place. It shows that this was important to the ancient people in a spiritual regard.
Mm. Yeah, and I don't know if people know this, but the Pyrenees, the mountains of the Pyrenees range, I suppose Bugarach is a sort of off-lier. It's not properly part of them, but it's
the foothills.
It's the foothills, yeah. So the Pyrenees are named after a goddess who was the wife of Hercules. Heracles, when he passed through there on one of his pilgrim, his tasks, he had this love affair with Pyrenee, and she died sadly. So he piled up the Pyrenees mountains on top of her as her funeral cairn. Mm. That's a similar legend to your Bugarach one.
Yeah.
And again, we come back to the idea of the goddess being in the landscape.
Yeah, that's very much my inspiration, actually, being here, is feeling and relating to the goddess in this landscape. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you hear my daughter, Shanti Grace, speak about romanticism and pilgrimage?
Yeah, pilgrimage is a very interesting subject. Yeah, she's a sweet daughter.
Because the Romantics saw the goddess in the landscape. I think the Romantics brought back that idea, the poets.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that it kind of, it brought back that sacredness of the landscape itself.
Yes, which is the body of the goddess, her curves and her passions in the hot springs, and there are so many poetic ways of relating it.
Yeah. So Gaia is, in a sense, the modern eco version of Mary Magdalene, you could argue, the greening of Mary Magdalene. I'll be talking about that a bit later after tea. Right, so if there's no other questions to Susie, thank you very much for sharing. And okay, let's break for tea. And can you, Susie, before you go, can I ask you one thing? Is it possible for you to turn the camera around? Can you show us the mountain at all? Can you the...
Oh, I don't think it will stretch that. Oh, come on. There's lots of trees in the way.
Just point the camera around so we can see the mountain.
Just got to try and find a way through the trees where you can see it. You have to tell me if you can see it or not.
We can see, yeah, we're beginning to see it. Point the camera up a bit, above the trees. Yeah, I think there it is. That's the mountain. We can see it now, Bugarach. It looks like a sort of giant eagle without spread wings, doesn't it?
And the vultures fly around it.
Right.
There's lots of bird symbolism, wings.
Very shamanic then, yeah. Mm. Yeah, I do recommend people, if you're in the Pyrenees, go to Mount Bugarach, and it's definitely worth a visit. Mm. Right, thank you very much. Okay, well, we'll stop there for tea, and we'll recommence. We've got a talk by Annalisa Dare coming on at 4 o'clock. So thank you again to Susie and her marvelous question. Okay, see you at 4, people. Tea time.